Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. My name is Avais. I am the co-founder and CEO at Pixel Space Technologies. To sum it up, we are a space technology company that builds our own satellites, and we also do analysis on satellite imagery for a variety of different industries such as agriculture, mining, environment, forestry. We became the first Indian company ever to launch a private satellite earlier this year in April when we put up our satellite called Shakuntala on a SpaceX rocket. Um, Glad to have been invited here. It's an honor, and we'll be just speaking about the journey of how we got started while we were still students at college in BITS Pilani in Rajasthan, and how we have managed to scale here. One of the earlier factors when we started was that India has a lot of talent, it has a lot of expertise, infrastructure, and experience in space technology. And you see a lot of these global companies like SpaceX and Boeing and Airbus coming up, but you don't really see any Indian company apart from obviously the government agency ISRO in space. So there was a lot of big opportunity there. So I grew up in a small town called Chikmagalur in Karnataka state here in India. I was always fascinated with space. I think most of us are. Space and the cosmos and the universe are stir something in us as humans. Um, I remember very specifically forcing my father to buy me a telescope when we could barely afford it to be able to look at the stars, and that didn't really pan out. But in 10th standard, there was a event called the Transit of Venus that was occurring, which is going to happen for the last time this century, where you would see Venus passing through the sun and you would be able to see it from Earth, essentially Venus passing between the Earth and the sun. And given that it was a rare event, our school had managed to procure this telescope. So looking at that rare astronomical event cemented that love and passion for space even more. But like most of us, after that, I got into the rat race of competitive exams, getting a good college, getting a good degree, and thankfully ended up at a place that has shaped me in more ways than one, BITS Pilani. So I was a fairly studious student before getting into BITS, and then it was the exact opposite after joining BITS because they don't have a attendance policy. The only university in the country that doesn't have a attendance policy. So it's really the people around you that you get to work with and meet and interact with that essentially shape you, and that's what happened here. It also doesn't hurt that there's nothing outside of the campus except a desert there. So everyone's forced to essentially talk and figure out interesting things to do. This is a quote that has driven a lot of things in my life. If you are offered a seat on a rocket ship, don't ask why, just get on it because the adventure is definitely going to be fun. And a lot of things that have happened in life, from starting Pixel to then doing a lot of things, have been precipitated on this quote. And I'll take you through a few of those examples. The first one was as soon as I joined college, there was a student satellite team at the university that was building a small satellite, and the Indian Space Research Organization was helping students to build this satellite because building something that will operate in the harsh confines of space in vacuum, in high temperature, low temperature conditions is an entirely different matter to building something that works just on ground. So being part of that team essentially shaped a whole host of things where you were forced to start thinking from first principles rather than analogies. So even though I didn't really study a whole lot in the official courses, a lot of things were actually taught at the team here by just interacting with people, interacting with scientists at ISRO, which has obviously been one of the prides of our country. In my second year of college, I happened to stumble into the room of one of my seniors who was scribbling something about the Hyperloop on the whiteboard. And we all have heard of the Hyperloop at one point or the other when Elon Musk and SpaceX resurfaced the idea of the Hyperloop in 2017. And there was a competition that SpaceX was organizing. They had built a mile-long vacuum tube at the headquarters in Los Angeles. And it was an open challenge to teams around the globe to build a Hyperloop pod, essentially a smaller version of a train that could travel at really, really fast speeds, almost the speed of sound, because since you're removing air from the vacuum tube, you can go at much faster speeds. There's not a lot of air friction. And so that was the second experience and probably the most defining experience or steep learning curve up until that point, because no one really had built a Hyperloop pod before. There was no one that could tell us this is what you have to do, this is what you don't need to do, because no one had done that. There was no material on the internet. You couldn't search for how to build a Hyperloop on Google, and it would give you something. ChatGPT is all the craze nowadays. Even ChatGPT wouldn't give you anything because there was nothing to base on it. But working on this, where we couldn't build this in Pilani, Rajasthan, where we were studying, so we had to come down to Bangalore for a span of 3 months in the summer holidays to figure out how to actually put this together and also raise money at the same time. Because as students, none of us really had the money, so raising sponsorship, marketing, but mainly building something truly innovative that was probably done for the first time. So we became the only Indian finalist team at this competition that SpaceX had organized, and we built that Hyperloop pod in Bangalore. We took it all the way to Los Angeles. We showed it to Elon Musk, rest of the SpaceX team, and stood 8th out of 2,500 global applicants, competing with a lot more well-funded teams. Thank you, like Stanford and MIT and others. So I think that at that point, I remember the date exactly, August 27th of 2017. They took us on a tour of the SpaceX factory, looking at those rocket engines being built there, looking at that rocket that they keep in front of their office that had landed back on Earth for the first time. That's when it crystallized in my mind that I want to devote the rest of my life to space technology. One, because I've always been fascinated and passionate about it. But also that if a company that started 20 years ago could do something so well, so fast, given the expertise, experience, infra we have here in the country with what ISRO has done and that foundation that we have built, there was no reason why a global world-beating company couldn't be built out of India as well. And so that essentially was the start of the germination of the idea that led to Pixel from there. And this is one other code that has been a major part of life. You could either watch it happen or be a part of it. And that was the thinking on August 27th in 2017, where I said, the one way to actually be in the space technology industry is to start something of your own. So I came back from there to college, and my co-founder and I studied together there. And over a course of FIFA video gaming sessions, we started discussing a whole host of things. And while researching about everything space, whether it is rockets or satellites or space stations, came across this image. So you won't really see a whole lot of things, but there's a white dot there in the center. That is Earth. That's you, me, and everyone else, right? And looking at that, that's everyone that's ever lived. And when you look at it from that perspective, you'll realize how fragile we all are. We all are one species, but also that it's a fragile planet. And we need to do all we can to take care of it. So there were two factors that intertwined at that point in time: love for space technology and creating positive impact and making the world a better place. And there were a whole host of things with space technology that you could do that could make it happen, right? And things started to fall in place, and this was while we were entering the final year of our undergraduate studies in BITS. There are a lot of problems plaguing our planet today, from deforestation to hyper-urbanization, to rapid population growth, to water shortages, to food insecurity, not enough food being there in certain areas, to climate change, which is probably the largest problem that humanity as a species faces today. And to be able to look at it at global scales, to actually be able to see how these problems are shaping up all across the globe, you needed relevant kinds of technology to do that, and satellites were the way to go, imaging satellites that could image this. So we looked at what was being done today. When you look at any of these satellites that ISRO or NASA or any of the space agencies launch, you will see that they are fairly huge. They fill up an entire room in most cases. Building them takes time, costs a lot of money, and that's not something that we can afford to lose. But there was a drastically different way of doing it. Given the miniaturization in electronics, etc., you could do it better. So here in the screen you can see a satellite that an agency in the US was building, and someone forgot to just put in one bolt one night, and then the satellite essentially fell apart. A $300 million satellite ended up costing $200 million to repair, and that's something that you need to avoid, to bring the software iteration process into hardware, where we all have heard move fast and break things. We can't break things in space tech, but what we can do is iterate quickly, at least by building things smaller and leveraging Moore's law. And that's essentially the idea. As students, we were quite naive, I think, and that really helped us, because if we had read a little bit more, we would have realized it was a difficult task. But we said, let's get started on building a health monitor for our planet, and we will do that by building small satellites, a constellation that we will put up there, and we'll build it with technologies that no one else has done globally anywhere, and thereby show that companies in India can also be built that can compete at a global stage. And as I said, being naive, I think at that point really helped, because we didn't really plan it out honestly for the next 5 years or 10 years. We said, let's just get started and see where it goes. As students, no one really at that point in time was willing to trust us or put money. We could get meetings with almost anyone, because it was a very interesting concept that we were working on. But from getting from there to actually raising money to get into that venture was an entirely different problem altogether. But we said, let's get started. We have 1 year of college. We'll figure it out. By the time we get out, we either figure out Pixel, or we can start looking for a job then. Right? And one of the major things with space technology that gave us confidence was, you'll have seen headlines like how India's Mars mission cost less to make than the movie The Martian, or the moon mission Chandrayaan cost less than the movie Gravity. And that's a heritage and experience that we have, where we, without compromising quality or mission readiness, we could actually build these spacecraft and send it out there, and that's something that we ourselves could build on top of, right? So no one really trusted it at that point, but we had some very few backers from our university who were willing to take a chance on us, who we talked to, who said, this is something that students are attempting to do. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, it's fine. It's still a good experiment to have. So thankfully, after that, we were able to raise a small amount of pre-seed round from mainly the angel investors who have been big supporters of our company, and get started on manufacturing. And I think that's really when things started to change, because once you show actual hardware being built, things start to get tangible. People see proof that it's not something that's on paper, that's on a deck, that's on a computer. We're starting to realize that in the physical sense, right? And what also helped at that point in time is we got into this accelerator in the US, where we got to work with NASA, with the US Air Force, with Lockheed Martin and others. That gave us a lot of credibility at that point in time. Right out of college, as soon as we graduated, we traveled to Los Angeles to be a part of this accelerator and get moving from there. And finally, I think on the basis of all of that, thankfully, we also raised India's largest Series A round at that point in time to make satellites, because satellites cost a lot of money, honestly. And to be able to do that, we needed this money. And thankfully, on the basis of that progress, we were able to get there. So finally, in April, as I mentioned, we became the first company in India to launch a private satellite that's today actually beaming down some really good data, which will enable us to take a better sense of the pulse of our planet and create that health monitor that we were talking about. And 3 weeks ago, we launched the third of our satellites, actually. This was supposed to be our first satellite, but due to certain delays that happen in the space technology domain, we were launching it with the ISRO rocket. So the entire team of about 50 folks traveled all the way to Sriharikota and were able to look at the launch go up there. So I think, having the support from the top, where the privatization of space only happened in 2020, because when we started in 2019, there was no guarantee that there was going to be a policy that would enable private participants to actually participate. So coming back to that same thread earlier, is that we just got started because this was something that we realized was important to do, and being naive at that point in time definitely really helped as well. If your dreams are not big enough, if they don't scare you, they're not big enough. And this is something that we are not stopping. There's a lot of things to do. These satellites that we are building can be used to map our entire solar system. These satellites can be used to build a lot of models that can help us identify everything from leaks to stopping deforestation, and also not only that, but get beyond the confines of our own planet and see what's happening in the solar system and how humanity becomes a multiplanetary species, right? And finally, at each stage, there were obviously a lot of naysayers in our journey that told us that this could never happen. I remember this meeting very specifically when we were starting off, where a scientist who had more years of experience than the both of us had been alive told us that he's been he's been doing this for a lot of years, and there's no way that this would be possible. And that just gave us more fuel at that point in time to say, physically there's really nothing impossible about what we're trying to do. We just have to get at it. And thankfully, with our backers and supporters, we were sort of able to get there. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's really, at each point in time, there'll always be people who will say no, but it's really you, the man in the arena or the woman in the arena, that really matters, because people can hurl abuses at you, they can tell you that you can't do something, but as long as you are there and you keep on moving, something or the other will happen. So thanks again to our supporters and the team that we have here, but it's fun every day, honestly, working on something that will help the planet be better, and it's also really cool to work on space technologies. So that's our story, and there's no reason why India now can't move on from being one of the software powerhouses to actually working on cutting-edge technologies that will move us forward as a species as well. Thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We request you to please stay back on stage. We still have a few more minutes on your time. So if anybody who wants to shoot any questions for Mr. Awais Ahmed, please feel free. I think you would have the mic over there. Can we give the mic to the person? Sir.
Thank you.
We'll just take a couple of questions here.
Hello, my name is Srinivas. So, what it takes in terms of cost to deliver one satellite now through Pixel?
So it depends on what kind of satellite you're building. You can build something as small as a shoebox today to as big as entire size of the room. In our very specific case, it costs anywhere between 10 to 30 crores per satellite to launch, instead of what would have taken 100 to 300 crores 5 years back, right? So it's that 10x reduction in cost that really helps put many more satellites, a constellation up there. So in our case, ranges between 10 to 30 depending on what you're trying to do.
We have just one more question coming up.
Yeah, congratulations again. Great achievement. You're the pride of India, really. Hope all your dreams really do come true. A quick question, please. In terms of what the James Webb telescope is actually doing now, I'm sure that planning probably started about 10, 15 years ago. I believe something like $10 billion and many countries put together. Is there a next generation of James Webb that's already being planned? And you talked about interplanetary life. So is there anything on those lines that you can enlighten us on?
Yeah. So I think 15 years ago is when the manufacturing of James Webb Space Telescope started. It was supposed to launch 10 years ago, and of course with delays, etc. It's an entirely different approach to us, right? In our case, we are fine if one or two of our satellites out of the 30 or 50 that we are looking at end up failing, because then the remaining parts of the constellation can fill it up. But with the case of something like a James Webb Space Telescope, you're spending $10 billion or upwards of that, so you can't really afford for it to not work, because then it's a matter of 3 or 4 decades wait. There are definitely other telescopes such as that are already being planned and built out. Usually these happen in a cycle of 2 or 3 decades. So Hubble Space Telescope was launched in the 1990s, around 1990, and now finally James Webb Space Telescope has gone up. So in the next 10, 20 years, we will have at least one more from NASA and one more from European Space Agency that will go out, which is a lofty goal, right? Of course, GPS has helped us make our life better, and we can look at the Earth, but understanding really what helped creators in terms of the universe, such as those telescopes, really help us. So we are looking forward to many more coming up.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Mr. Awais Ahmed, founder and CEO Pixel.